my audience. This is Paul, and I am joined here today, it's probably on the side for you guys, by the fine folks at Rational Typology, who did an interview with me as well, although this time it's my style, so it's going to be a lot more free form. But before we get started, I was wondering if you guys would like to make a plug for your channel, or if you have anything you'd like to say to the audience.
Yeah, cool. I'm Nina and this is Gabriel, and thank you so much for inviting us to be on your channel. Yeah, we have a channel where we talk about our system a little bit, and we interview other people that we have typed to showcase the types and how they answer certain questions.
Now, would you like to explain to the audience what you mean by your system?
We made a MBTI-ish system that is more rigorous. So yeah.
So in other words, you're making it more convenient to type people as opposed to the more vague terminology?
Yeah, more accurate.
So more accurate, more specific when it comes to explaining specific things about people, and has an objective typing system.
And we haven't got enough information on it out yet, but we're working on the website to get it all up there so people can read up on it.
Well, that's nice. As a dominant sensor, I love it when things are clear.
Yeah.
So that is much appreciated. So in case you audience haven't watched their channel before, Nina is an INFJ and Gabriel is an INTJ. And if you've been watching my Myers-Briggs videos, you know that both of those types lead with introverted intuition, and then their bottom function is extroverted sensing, but then they have different thinking and feeling functions. So let's start out with what you guys have that's the same. So would you guys like to tell me, how do you mutually use dominant intuition and inferior sensing, and like what are similarities between you two with those mutual functions?
You're probably better at the technical terms.
We're both very good at like the pattern recognition, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'll say the start of a sentence, then you know what I mean by it.
Yeah.
But then we play with that out with each other, so it's like we'll come up with like nonsense terminology quite frequently.
Yeah, just to play around.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like speaking the same language, and it's very easy to communicate in that way, except for differences with TE and TI.
Like it could be stuff like I might say a joke, but then I might get the same sound but in like a different word, and then I'll say that in the same way and she'll know it was a joke because it's the same pattern.
Yeah, it's almost like we can communicate in that different language, which is like a very NI.
Yeah, it sounds so foreign to me because go ahead.
What can happen as well is it's like part of like an ongoing kind of evolving like a meta joke, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it's usually me that starts this, because it's usually me messing with you.
Yeah.
And so I'll start the thing, and I'll say something like the moon wants to go on a walkabout, and then you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I was just that aside. I was thinking of an analogy of how to explain it in a maybe more of an S sense, and it's like if you get a camera and you have the viewfinder and it constantly readjusts and readjusts and readjusts, it's sort of like in my mind I constantly go through the right pattern to see which one fits. That's what it feels like to me. So
yeah,
and then he will deliberately mess with it and just say a pattern that's slightly off, and it'll annoy me. So he likes annoying me like that.
Interesting. So you like consistency in the patterns then, am I correct?
Yeah, it's like I want to play it out to see where it goes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about like when you talk to people that don't have introverted intuition, like what is your general thought pattern in using it? Let me rephrase the question. So with your dominant way of thinking, you might encounter someone like me who has a very hard time understanding introverted intuition. What is your go-to method to ensuring that that person is not thoroughly confused?
I tried to fill in the technical details, I guess.
Depending on type, I would say.
Like if I'm talking to someone like you that is still a thinker, then I'll predominantly try to explain things in a TE sense, because I know that we're both gonna share that. But then if they're like an SF, I often just can't communicate with them properly. Like I try to be nice, I guess.
Yeah. For me, like it was a lot harder when I didn't know about typology, and I would just talk in all these patterns, and then often my friends would say, could you just stop and just explain that again? And then I'd try to explain it again, and that would happen a lot, but I wouldn't know. I didn't know why, because I had no concept of what a type is and the different types and how they function. But yeah, now I do try to, I guess, cater to the different types.
That's interesting. And I think in your case, being an INFJ, you're probably using extroverted feeling to just naturally grasp that need.
Yeah. I constantly try to see what they may want or how I could validate what they're feeling in a certain way.
Interesting. Well, I don't know if feelings are necessarily correlating with confusion, but I suppose like when you say feelings, you mean like the needs of understanding in the conversation?
Yeah, or even it's sort of like I can sense or like I imagine what they may be feeling, and I want to then say things specifically to either affirm that if I like them or if they're accurate, or disaffirm that feeling, or like make them less scared, or influence what they're doing through FE.
I think that's a neat way of unintentionally saying that you're not an ENFJ, because you're clearly using introverted intuition to hypothesize how to use it.
Yeah.
If you're wondering why I keep doing this with my hands, it's because on my channel, for the people that are newer to function stacks, I point out where each function is in the stack while I'm talking.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, maybe you guys can give it a try if you're ever feeling like not editing like crazy.
I'm probably not coordinated enough to do that.
But
well, that's like
I kind of imagine it like an X though. So.
But we've both studied neurolinguistic programming, and it's actually a way of programming people by doing a certain hand movement or something and saying the same thing, and it helps them anchor whatever it is that you're trying to teach. So you're doing that.
Interesting. So I'm doing what you guys studied without studying.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, what you said about coordination segues perfectly into my question about extroverted sensing. So that would be your weakest function. I mean, if we're not going by the shadow functions, which you already said isn't part of your system.
Yeah.
So extroverted sensing being your weakest function, obviously that means you struggle with it.
Yeah.
And while I'd like to hear about that, I'd also like to hear where you still have it, even if it's fourth. So what are the benefits of having that as opposed to me having introverted sensing?
Okay, starting off, I think, with that we still have it and we still do it. Like we still do physical things, we still remember physical things. I think it's just more vague and less details of it. We both try to avoid it as much as possible. So we do go to the gym, for example, but if we're stressed or something, it's the first thing to go. So we won't do that. Where I know that a lot of high S people, or especially high SE people, they want to exercise and do stuff outside and move their body as a way of feeling better when they're stressed.
So the physical world is basically a last resort for you guys?
Yeah, unless you really like something. We really like something, like an activity you use to sword fight.
What about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when it comes to physical thing, because that'll be like food, like art, that kind of stuff. And it's like I do like food and I do like art, but it's the first thing to just not be interesting if there's something else.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because from what I've heard, and I could be wrong here, but from what I've heard, when INFJs and INTJs are under stress, all of a sudden their function stack flips. So then they heavily rely on their extroverted sensing and they have a tendency to binge. Are you saying that you guys are the other way around?
Well, so that behavior could happen. But that's not a result of it flipping. That's a result of being a poor coping strategy. Like, it's similar to how like someone like an ESFP, like patterns last, might gamble if they feel stressed because it's a misuse of that last function.
Gotcha.
Because if you're like a INTJ or an INFJ, you just kind of feel that gambling will waste money.
Yeah, you just already know the outcome of it because
and
you've calculated
because it's just pattern recognition. The pattern always leads to losing money if you do it for long enough time, so you never do it. And that's going to be obvious to any like primary pattern user.
Although that's funny that you say you wouldn't bother gambling, because I don't use intuition as my primary, and yet I don't want to gamble either. But I think in my case, it's more of, why would I want to lose money? That
Yeah,
would
you
be
thought it through
losing a
with it.
profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding you guys correctly, if with extroverted sensing as your bottom function, the physical world is your lowest priority,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean you're completely unaware of it.
Yeah.
It's just that it's often harder for you to recall the specific details. Like you wouldn't be like me where I'm like, the rug was this color and the wall was this color and all the boring stuff, as you might word it.
Well, I wouldn't think of it as boring. I'd think of it as like hard to recall.
Unless for me it stands out emotionally and I go, wow, this is amazingly beautiful, and I make some emotional connection, then I'll remember it. But other than that, it's like I don't know.
So with me, I remember the operations of physical things more than the physical things.
Mhm.
So you like to work out how the system works because of your introverted intuition, correct?
Yeah, so like I don't remember what color the door is, but I know what it's for. Like I also know the general weight of it as well, because
Gotcha.
there'll be a systems that will be like relate to that would relate to like how mass propels itself under stress. So they're just like a system of how stuff works, but the actual physical details are like blurry.
Speaking of physical details, I actually just noticed something which you guys will be like, darn it, that S, noticing stuff. I noticed that your background is split between black and white, which are the opposite colors of both of your hair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did you do that on purpose, that you wouldn't blend in with the background?
Yeah, my hair was blending in with the black all the time, so I didn't like it, so I changed it. Yeah.
Oh, that's
But we do like
fascinating.
what it does too. So
Yeah, because I noticed, Gabriel, when I was watching your previous video where you debated with Yoshi, like your shirt being black, it made it look like you were a floating head.
yeah.
And I just thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, people have said that before. Yeah.
So I think I've understood everything as well as oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting. There's something that you might find interesting or probably bizarre being a primary S user is like we can injure ourselves without knowing how or why.
That is very
Unless it's
strange.
obvious. Or like car accident or something, you'd know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are often bruises and cuts and stuff, and I don't know. I don't know where they come from. Or he had a what was it? Appendicitis for 3 weeks before he was hospitalized by an ambulance because he just didn't do anything about it.
Interesting.
And then it burst and he had to have like be cleaned out and stuff. So it was intense.
Wow.
But he just ignored it.
That's funny, because that happens to me every now and then, but it's usually the exception, not the norm. Because I used to work as a dishwasher, so having cuts on my hand became as regular as brushing my teeth.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, it's very rare for me to not notice when I've injured myself. And sometimes if I don't injure myself right away, I'll say that should have been bloody. Maybe my skin is just waiting for the blood to burst. Because sometimes if you only bruise the topmost layer, it's a little bit of a delay. Oh my gosh, that is so foreign to me. But hopefully you guys don't do like what my best friend does, who's also an INTJ, where he'll just be like, huh, what's going on? I'm not noticing anything.
No, I don't think so. But the other day, sorry?
I said you guys seem like you're at least somewhat aware of reality.
I think we don't take that many risks. I think that's what we tend to do. We tend to avoid too many risks, and we also tend to want to be very efficient with physical things, so we can minimize them. So I will constantly think of what I have to physically do next if I have to do stuff to efficiently get it done.
It's easier to think about doing the physical thing than to do the physical thing.
Yeah, because you just make the pattern in the first place.
So-
So I know I have to get out my keys of my purse when I'm paying for the food. So then I don't have to do it later when I go to the car. It's already done. I already got it in my hand ready, for example.
So it seems like you're compensating really well for your weakness then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try to, at least.
Yeah. Well, it's like I'll have like a pattern of how to make a food, and I'll go through the pattern, but I don't really pay attention to what I'm doing properly.
Man, this is so much fun. It's like being in a whole new world. So I think I've got everything I need from the mutual functions. Now let's start going into differences. So audience, if you don't know, the INTJ judging functions are they have secondary extroverted thinking and tertiary introverted feeling, whereas the INFJ has secondary extroverted feeling and tertiary introverted thinking. So in what ways are you guys different having those different functions there?
Okay, I can give you an example of something that happened the other day. We try to go to the gym probably every day, but only for like 20 minutes or so. And the other day it got a bit late, and Gabriel asked me if I still wanted to go, and I said, I'm really tired, but if you want to go, let's go. That's fine. Because it's only 20 minutes, it's easy, right? So we get ready, get dressed, get ready, are in the car, and then he realizes that he's too tired. It's because he didn't even check his feelings, or like his feelings didn't come up before then. I already knew I was tired and didn't really want to go, but will if he wants to. And then we decided not to go because he was too tired. So the way his feelings update is much slower than mine. And that's one of the major differences in regards to feelings. What about thinking?
What about on the extroverted thinking side? Like, where are you different there?
It's like well, I'm pretty good at breaking down logical structures for things in general. So, like, if we got a comment or something, I might like kind of almost unconsciously just be like, error, this is maybe true, and then like kind of like rank order the possible points that they might have. And then I do that pretty quickly, and then when I explain it, you kind of like don't understand it properly all the time.
Yeah, you have to. It's almost like you have to give me the way it connects more, because it's harder for me to make the connections. Yeah, the other day we were making a video intro. It was actually for the debate, and we had to do it a couple times, the intro. And I realized that Gabriel wants to explain how the debate functioned, how it went like that, and I wanted to explain the emotional reasons of why people should watch it. So that is one of the differences too. Like, I will always go for the emotional reasons rather than how something operates technically. That's much harder for me.
Yeah, I'm way more likely to focus on like how something operates or how it should be operating, and then it's like that's the reason, and then there's like an emotional criteria.
Yeah.
It's like, for example, freedom of speech should be enforced, because otherwise it always decays into a totalitarian society.
One thing that I've noticed about each like judging / perceiving function is that it seems like whenever you use it, you're like also subconsciously using the opposite judging function. So like every extroverted thinker has introverted feeling, for example. So like that means that for every this must be the way it is, your introverted feeling is saying it must be the way it is because I feel like it.
Yeah, I definitely think they're connected.
So I think that that T, like T, both TI and TE, is orientated around how things technically operate, but then it's going to operate differently with TE and TI. Yeah.
I've noticed that introverted thinking has a tendency to like create their own systems for how things work, as opposed to being like rules, who needs those?
It's almost like, when you go to a workplace and you learn all the work health and safety protocols. It's sort of like protocols. In this situation, do this, 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 or this. And then I'll run through the protocol of what I should do in any given situation. And that's automatic then, once I make it like a TI protocol like that.
Yeah. And then with TE, it's almost like, it's like context dependent. It's like, in this context, it operates like this.
It seems much more fluid for you. For me, it's more like, this is how I internally operate. This is the rules I've set for myself, the protocols I've set. For you, it's like the FI values that you're operating from. For me, it's like the protocols I've made from the feedback I got from the feelings from outside.
Yeah, because I'm sure you can relate to this, Gabriel, but when I use my extroverted thinking to say, like, this is what I must do, this is what my commander tells me, it also comes from that introverted feeling sense of this is my duty.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's like, if you're doing a thing for a person, then it's because you want to. Like, if you have FI.
Yeah, and usually when I make a decision, I'll say, this is the conclusion I have come to, as opposed to trying to make people happy. Whereas I presume it's the other way around for you, Nina?
It depends. Yeah, but it's sort of like what's expected. And especially if you don't define it properly, it can be like, what's the societal expectation? And then I'll do that until I think about it. And like, the more you can critically think and dissect what you're doing and why, the better your protocols will be. But if it's just vague or very low, or you just don't think about it much, then it'll definitely be from the outside, as in like, what's right, what's wrong here, or how is it done? How should I act from the outside?
Is it possible you could give me an example? Because I'm having trouble following.
Okay.
Is that like when people are like, signs make me feel a certain way?
What?
I don't know. I've heard people say this. It's like, I feel I have self-confidence issues because I've allowed signs to influence my emotions.
Science?
Signs, like advertising.
I guess it could be. It's sort of like a societal expectation of what a woman should look like based on advertising, and then you internalize that and go, this is what I should do, and then you compare yourself in that way.
Because I've always found that method of thinking arcane. I've never thought I should be like that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a more TI way. But it's sort of also like, if you look at a recipe, for example, and then you learn that recipe, and then that's how the food should be done. The less, the lower your TI, I guess, the less categories you will have, and the more strict you'll be about it, unless you think about it and go, oh, it doesn't really matter, you know, because anyone can just have it the way they want to. They can cook it the way they want to. But I think that's something that doesn't come that natural to people with low T or low TI.
That actually got me to ask in my head another question that I didn't plan. But before I get to that, I wanted to go over the tertiary function. Now, I don't know how it works in your specific system, but in the Myers-Briggs, the tertiary is what we call the teenage function or the room to grow function, which is like, kind of like, it's okay, but it has room to grow. Like, so for me, like, my introverted feeling is like kind of very primitive. Like, I know what I want and I know my desires, but sometimes I'll say, maybe now is not the right time, or maybe I should be selective about how much I'm using. As opposed to the INFPs, where they're just like exploding with their emotions.
Yeah.
So how do you guys, like, I guess I should say, in what ways are your tertiary functions developed, but also in what ways can you see yourself improving?
I think for me, it's sort of how I mentioned it, that the lower your T, or if it's in your third, if TI is your third function, then it's harder for you to make more TI categories and more protocols. So you might be more strict about the ones you've got and think they're right when they may not be right. It's just that you haven't thought about it properly. So definitely learning to critically think has helped me improve my TI. So that's what I would recommend. But I also notice, we've noticed in our system, we define that, we say that the third function can cut out under stress. So for me, if I'm stressed in an argument or something, it's harder for me to make more TI categories as well, where it's way easier for you.
Yeah,
T
so
categories.
like regardless of context, I'm good at seeing the operations of things. I'm not really necessarily good at understanding if I want to do the thing, but I'll know what it does.
Yeah, but you'll notice with him in a debate, for example, his emotions don't go up and down. It's like he even, I don't know if that was stressful for you, but he can just be like even. It's just even for him.
I did notice that, like, Yoshi kept getting heated, whereas you only, like, I think it was 4 times the whole argument where you're just like, oh boy.
You're rolling
Like you managed to have a pretty consistent wavelength, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's because it's in third position. It's so, like, for me, if it cut out, which it probably didn't, because it wasn't very stressful, but if I was stressed, and then there wouldn't have been much actual difference in my behavior, because I'm still using the two top functions. My feelings will also lag behind in some situations. So, like, for an example, I was playing paintball with somebody, with a group of friends, and I spent like most of the session like trying to figure out how people would react under stress, and so then I could kind of like take advantage of the heuristics to get them to like kind of like panic. And so I spent like all this time doing it, and then I managed to get like really close to someone, and I was like had the paintball at the head, and then I was like then I kind of like the emotion kind of caught off, and I was like probably shouldn't maybe hurt my friend. So I didn't actually go through with it, but that's like an example of like in the pattern of things functioning rather than in the if you should do it.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, let me use an example in my own understanding. Like sometimes I might be thinking like this is just the way it is, and then just talk to people. But then after I send the text, I'll be like, maybe I was a bit rude there. Maybe I should rephrase that.
Yeah, it's like
it
lagging.
took me
Yeah, there's a lag with your feelings, with your FI.
I mean, I personally think my introverted feeling is pretty strong by ISTJ standards. Like generally speaking, I don't need to, like a lot of YouTubers are just like, I am all of a sudden realizing that this job is stressful, where for me, I'm just like, if I'm feeling stressed, I'll take a break. Like I don't need to come to that realization.
Yeah, so when it comes to things like sending messages, you're probably focused on if the thing makes sense and if the thing is like consistent with reality. And then behind that, it'd be how you thought about it.
It could also just be my sense of duty saying I must uphold common sense and common courtesy, and I just didn't there, so I failed.
Well, for someone that had like F in first or second position, that would be the primary awareness. And
the primary consideration.
And then after that, they'll be like, did this make sense? It's like reversed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Maybe. I'd probably have to have a multitude of examples. So the original question that I had that went a bit off script is that you mentioned categories earlier. But then when I was looking through the comments of the video that you guys did with me, I noticed that the high intuitive users, especially the NFs, were just like, oh my gosh, so many ST categories. And to me, I was like, I'm making categories? I wasn't even trying to. So like, because neither of you are S types, and especially not STs, like, how is it that you don't use categories? Like, how is that even possible to use in your mind?
So a category is just like a separation in information. So ST categories would just be like you're using those functions. So you're using like S things, like you're talking about stuff, and then T is like the operations of things. So you're talking about how stuff operates most of the time. But you're doing this unconsciously as well as consciously. And you probably can't not do it.
But everyone
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, so a category itself is just like a segregation in information. But for us, we'd have like pattern categories, and then
like, so we'd make categories together with our T function and our N, well, all the others as well, but mostly T and N. And he would make more than me because his T and N are higher.
Yeah.
So I would make a lot more feelings.
So the difference between patterns and categories would be like patterns are taking a whole bunch of things and condensing them into one, whereas I would say something like, what does an orange have to do with a chair? Like I would just think that those are totally separate beings or entities.
So like having high patterns isn't quite like that. It's kind of like anyone can say anything and you'll imagine a bunch of shit from it.
Yeah, anyone can make associations, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's like a lot of like branching tendrils of what you could be referencing. Like when you said orange and chair, I thought of like how they could be connected.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah, as soon as you said that, I thought, well, the chair could be orange.
Well, I was like maybe someone has like ground down like orange peel and made it into some kind of like art
Oil?
piece.
Oh, for me, it was like maybe they can use orange oil to, I don't know, polish it in some way. I
Oh,
don't
that's fascinating,
Yeah,
because
or
that
like
was not what came to my mind at all.
or maybe someone has like engineered a tree to grow in the shape and it is an orange tree. It's just like that's what I thought of like as you said it.
Mhm.
It's like pattern associations. Like they're generally not accurate. It's worth mentioning. But if you do it all the time constantly, then you learn the ones that are accurate if you are critically thinking.
My gosh. This is so foreign. It's so hilarious, but it's so cool at the same time.
It is strange talking to someone with high S as well. It's so different.
I really admire people with S, like primary SI users, to just remember stuff.
Yeah.
Like I used to have this work colleague, and he was an ISTJ, same as you, and he could just remember so much like trivia about like how churches worked, so like crafting techniques and
Huh.
like how it operated in that way, and I just thought it was really cool.
People do call me the walking encyclopedia, so I can relate to that.
Yeah, cool.
So because both of you have introverted intuition and extroverted sensing, that obviously means that you don't have introverted sensing or extroverted intuition.
Mhm.
So I know you've given a couple of examples already, but like when you see someone, I guess we'll start with extroverted intuition. Like when you see someone using those two functions, like, is it confusing? Is it admiration? Like, what are your
Yes.
reactions when you see those?
I usually am fascinated by people with any. So I like how they can just string all the patterns like one next to the other, next to the other, next to the other, and it's easy to understand them as well. It's just that I can't spread out like that. I have to focus in and look through something and see the end of it. But they just like spread out and get all the patterns next to each other, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's the same spectrum of information, but they've observed the pattern in the environment in some way. So it typically seems more random from my perspective.
Yeah, sometimes it seems so random, but for them it isn't. They just can flip everything upside down and inside out and backwards and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but like as you said, it's very easy to understand.
Yeah.
What about introverted sensing? Like for me, when I see someone using introverted intuition, I'm just, most of the time I'm thoroughly confused and I have to ask a lot of questions and I'm just like I can't even begin to make sense of this.
That's interesting.
So obviously with me being a dominant introverted sensor, that would be like your migraine function is
Yeah.
what I like to call it. So do you find that people like me are confusing to you?
Not confusing, more like I have to strain sometimes after a while to still understand those ST categories, I guess. But I think SI is the function I can relate to the least. It's like I don't understand. It's the one I understand the least, or it's like I can't conceptualize it hardly at all.
From my perspective, I kind of interpret it as categories, if that can like if it makes sense to.
Like S categories.
Well, I'll interpret it as like technical categories if I can get away with it.
Oh, okay. So you translate it into
Yeah.
that. Okay.
But it doesn't really work like a lot of the time. So then I'm just kind of like trying to like I find it I guess it feels like the person is focusing heaps on a single pattern from my perspective.
Huh.
It's like they're really building up that framework, and I'm like, okay, but what about all these all these things.
So an example of how I would use it would be like take Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It has a really big soundtrack, but most of the music is compiled from other video games. So like I can just be in my head and just say, okay, there's the Gusty Garden Galaxy, and that's from Super Mario Galaxy, which came out on the Wii in 2007, and just instantaneously come up with all of that and organize it, saying, no, wait a minute, Mario Galaxy came out in 2007, so the Mario Sunshine tracks should be above that. New Super Mario Brothers over here, and I'm just like organizing this stupid amount of information
That's
that you
crazy.
guys are probably just like, that's so irrelevant.
That's fascinating.
So
though.
I find that impressive.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm like I
can't do
that.
any of that.
I can't remember like what I do in the morning most of the time. Yeah, so I really I find it impressive, and I can't do it, and I can't probably pay. Well, I try to pay attention to it, but but like I know that I'm interpreting patterns from it. I know I know that's not what you mean. So like when you said that, the patterns I made as a result of what you said was like you are effective at categorizing like technical physical information in regards to video games, and then the implications of that are you're probably quite good at trivia in general.
Yeah, I would say so.
Then the implications of that are is you'd be effective in like any kind of modern schooling system. I was specifically referring to like that you'd be good at remembering what the details of operations were, which is
Well, I suppose that's true, yeah.
yeah, which is a lot of how the tests operate. So in that area, you'd be effective.
I actually epically fail IQ tests because I often don't understand the
The
questions.
patterns.
Okay, so
Yeah.
IQ tests are predicated of pattern recognition and categories, specifically TI and NI.
hmm
So the people that are the best at IQ tests are like ISTPs, which have solid T and solid NI.
You mean INT?
Yeah.
Oh,
ISTPs,
ISTPs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it favors TI and NI. So like
Okay.
I'm pretty good at IQ tests.
INTPs are good at it too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, INTPs tend to rub it in my face how, as they word it, how stupid and dumb I am. Because, like, they'll say, well, I got an IQ of almost 300. You are so beneath me because your intelligence. And then they go on and on about how technically inept I am. And it's just like, INTPs, you need to learn how to be more polite.
Are you sure they're an INTP, not someone laughing as one?
Well, the thing is, for me, like usually one of the first signs that I recognize someone's type is I actually notice how weak their inferior function is,
Yeah.
as opposed to how
true.
strong their dominant. So like I can always tell when there's an ESTJ because I'm like, they are just trampling on people's feelings and they are just being so bossy. It's like overwhelming. Or like when I see an ENFP and I'm just noticing how clumsy they are and being like, how could you forget that? I'll be like, because I'm noticing the lack of introverted sensing before I'm noticing the extroverted intuition. So I have one more question for you guys, and then I think I'll wrap it up because I was hoping this would be a bit of a shorter interview because I know there's a lot to digest between three very different personalities.
Yeah.
The last question I had was, so all three of us are IJ types.
Mhm.
So I was curious if you've noticed that there's something that all three of us have in common that you'd like to share with the audience.
Well, I think you and him are about as separate as you can get, right?
You and
Like you and him.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very opposite functions.
Opposite functions, yes, but we both have a preference of structure and order over taking in information. Although that's not entirely true because in my studies of function stacks, I've actually learned that for the introverts, the last letter should technically be flipped because all of us have a perceiving function as the top. So that means even though we like our structure, at the same time, our dominant mode of thinking is, okay, let me analyze the information. Let me think, what do I do with what I have, as opposed to this is how it's gotta be, like the judging types are.
Yeah, I think that everyone does that. I think that's the stereotype that doesn't like work. Because I think that everyone's curious if it's if the realm of information includes their top two functions, then they'll be curious about the subject.
So like, how would that work for, say, an ESTJ? Because they do seem like they enforce more than they think.
Well, so with the ESTJs I know about, they're typically quite curious about how things should operate or do operate, especially in regards to like if it has a physical reference point.
So they'll focus on thinking about those things.
Yeah, I was listening to one talk about how economics worked, and he's just very thorough about it. It's like this works like this because of this, 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 and there was a bunch of like TE categories.
But it also seems like he's making well, I guess not assumptions, but just like he's asserting that this is how it is, as opposed to saying my current conclusions have led me to this point. Like that's how I would imagine a dominant perceiver, which would include all of us, would. I mean, we might phrase it differently by using different functions, but generally speaking, that's the gist of what we're trying to say.
Isn't that just a being responsible thing though?
I have noticed a difference between, like, because we are both IJ types and our housemate is an INTP, and we are much more forward thinking, as in like thinking about shopping and stuff like that and organizing those kinds of things than he is. It's more structured in that way. But
that's probably a lead NI, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
We
it
just
might
know
be.
what will happen in the future.
But have you also noticed that your INTP housemate is like more prone to get like defensive and like, what? You're saying there's another system?
No, he's not like that at all, actually. But that might just be him being open to learning and critical thinking. So I don't know other INTPs. Maybe
it's like INTPs are often quite curious.
Mm.
I think an INTP will learn a system in a pointless way just because they can. Like I think they just like novelty.
I have met another INTP who has been more assertive, as in he knows stuff and other people don't, though. So I have met that version of INTP as well.
Okay.
Maybe that's the version I've exclusively come across, and maybe that's why my experience has shown me that like the IP types, because they're technically judgers by their top function, leads to them being like, this is the system that I have established. In the case of the INFP, their values. In the case of the INTPs, their internal framework. They're just like, it has to be this way, and I will not budge on that. Whereas I think IJ types are more willing to say, let me just take in more information, let me learn more, let me observe more.
I can kind of get what you mean. I think I've known some ISTPs and like both lead TI, and they've been very kind of like stuck in the model that they've developed, I guess. They're like, this is how things operate. And then they don't, like, maybe they can't understand counter examples, or
I guess it's harder for them to make the patterns, so it's like they're trusting the patterns they've made.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm sure INTPs could get like that, but I haven't witnessed it.
I imagine when they're older and haven't been challenged as much and learn that they're often the smartest person in the room, that could happen.
Yeah, because I think what can happen with like INTPs and also INTJs, is that they can typically kind of outword somebody in a debate a lot of the time,
or in an argument, even just personal,
like maybe more than they should be, and then therefore they can feel like a false sense of competency.
Yeah, they feel like they're right, even though maybe technically they aren't. They just outworded the other person.
Yeah, I've noticed that like the ENTJs and the INTPs often don't even give me a chance to give a rebuttal because they've already thought of their next sentence. And it's like, at least give me a chance to talk, guys. So I think that's all the questions I had for now. I'm sure we could always schedule a part 2 if you guys are doubly curious.
Yeah.
Cool. But for now, thank you very much for joining my channel. Audience, if you would like to follow them, their general pattern is that they like to ask 16 questions across multiple types to see how people of different personalities will react to similar questions. And they've also recently been branching out into other categories as well. So I'm also on their channel as a guest,
Yep.
so you can come and see me there. Would you guys like to say anything to the audience before we leave?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks so much for inviting us to your channel again. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, this was great.
It was
I
nice.
really go ahead.
Sorry, it was nice being here. So
Yeah, it was nice getting a little bit more understanding on some very complex functions.
Cool.
Alrighty, so that'll do for now, audience. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.
Bye.